There are things that we do every single day that when you do them wrong, make you more vulnerable to back pain. And one of those things is breathing. Many people don't get better because they get bad treatment or bad advice. My goal for you is to make sure you understand back pain so you can eliminate it and get rid of it forever. So what's that one thing? When you breathe in, your spine is less stable. And what that means is stability is the ability to maintain proper motion of the vertebrae, but also you don't want a lot of motion in the spine. And when you have too much motion, that perpetuates the dysfunctional continuum, which leads to the breakdown of the joints. So really, in the end, it'll lead to the herniated disc, it'll lead to the bulging disc, it'll lead to the degenerated disc, it'll lead to stenosis and arthritis. All the things that can happen to the spine that will cause you pain happen as a result of instability in the spine. That's why you have pain, and there is things that you can do to get better. So we know that if you're doing an activity and you have micro movements of the vertebrae where they're flexing and extending, we've seen on MRI that makes the disc worse. It can actually herniate the disc further. It can actually slide forward and back. That'll create a breakdown of the joints. And it'll also rotate. So ideally, you don't want any motion of the spine. The spine is designed to be, they call it a flexible rod. It's really designed to be a rod, and that's what allows us to bear all the weight. And when everything works well, it stays in the proper spot. That's stability. But if it's flexible when you don't want it to be flexible, which is the instability, then you have the breakdown. So the key is about the breathing. We've talked about breathing and bracing a lot. They tend to be connected because when you're breathing, you may or may not be bracing as well as you could. But breathing is part of the cycle to stabilize. As you breathe in, which is when you inhale, your stomach tends to come out. It should anyway. And as it comes out, your rib cage tends to go up a little bit. And that creates or allows for the micro movement of the vertebrae. It allows for the vertebrae to move in ways that you don't want it to move, or in ways that it shouldn't be moving. So as you breathe in, it's unstable, but as you breathe out, as you exhale, the muscles contract around the abdomen to get the air out. So as you're exhaling, you're actually creating stability. So if you're doing an activity, technically, if you're going to do an activity that requires a lot of bending and twisting, you want to make sure you're bracing. And if anything, you can do the because that noise as you prevent the air from coming out, but get the air out, that causes the contraction of the bracing, which then prevents the motion. Somebody said the other day in one of the comments, oh, my friend did that when he was doing deadlifts, and I didn't know why he did that. Well, when you're deadlifting, which is not a terrible thing if you do it properly, but as you go down, you want to bend with your hips. I see a lot of people bending with their spine, and they always herniate their discs every single time. But if you get down there in the proper position and you go, what it does is it creates a compression in and around the spine to keep it so it's not all wobbly. You don't want it to move, especially when you're bearing heavy loads like deadlift, and deadlift is a lot of flexion and the load, which can be really damaging to the discs. So when you breathe out, that's when you are more stable. When you breathe in, you're less stable. So you wouldn't want to be breathing in when you have to do an activity that requires heavy spine motion. If anything, you brace it and then just like that. So that's the key. Force the air out, one single burst. Breathing in makes your spine less stable. So if you're doing an activity that requires heavy lifting, don't be breathing in. You can breathe in and hold it, but don't be breathing in as you're doing it. That's the key of the day. Get your life back.